Gary, welcome to the podcast. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you. I'm really excited about where this conversation might take us as a mental performance coach and a father of athletes. I think there's going to be some great information here for parents out there. So, Gary, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I hope so. Tell us about you. Let's break it down so the parents listening know a little bit more about you and where you're coming from in this space.
Yeah, I certainly am a father of three athletes, two boys and a girl, and they're out of the house now, so I'm an empty nester. But Gary Chupik from Seattle, Washington, and I'm a mental performance coach. I work with professional athletes and teams, and the odd college student, and even the odd, high school student. So I unlock potential and people, and I do that in a couple different ways. I have my elite mindset mental performance system or a process I take athletes through, and then for those of us who are a little bit older, I have something called the game plan for life, which is how to live a high performance life. So taking those same competitive juices and using them and implementing them in the different domains of your life. So I love both of those different aspects, and actually have one for business now. I just created called One Day Elevate, where I go into businesses and teach them how to think like professional athletes and how to create a championship culture in their organization. So that's just a brief synopsis of who I am, but my most proud accomplishment is being the father of three kids and watching them succeed at life.
Love it. Well, we're going to get into that for sure. Tell us quickly before I forget how people can find you, reach out to you, find your different programs.
Oh, thank you for asking. Yeah, most of my athletes are on Instagram, so I guess that's where I got to hang out the most. So Elite Mindset is my handle, and I'm the guy with the blue verification dot.
All right. Awesome. Really cool. Tell us about the three kids. We were talking before we hopped on here, and I was explaining to you where my kids are at and how I have less say in the things they're doing. Less, I can't change where they've a little bit, but can't really sway where they're at now at this point as a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old. But I feel like I did have an impact when they were 10, 11, 12 throughout those years. So let's start with this. When your kids were going through sports, maybe it's different for each of them, but what was your just overall, what were you trying to help them with? What was your point or points of focus through sports in their development?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. When your kids are really young, you're caretaker. And as they get a little bit older, you move into that coaching phase as a parent. But then there's some transition that happens in their mid to late 20s where you go from coach to consultant. And so that's kind of where I am now. If they ask me my opinion about something, I'm happy to give it. But they're not so open to me coaching them along the way. So I just have to kind of keep my mouth shut. But in that coaching phase of life, it was a lot of fun. I think my middle son was my most intense athlete, and he had some mental health issues and challenges, and so for me that was even more difficult. Like it wasn't just simple cut and tried. There were other factors at play in his mind going on, and the day and age has changed. Before I remember growing up in high school where a coach could grab a football helmet and yank it around. That's what my coach did to me. And so it's just a different day and age that we live in, and we have to adapt to those things. So it was a little bit more challenging with him, but in some ways it was more fun because once he sort of figured stuff out, it was fun to watch this young stallion run. So it was just harder to tame, but once he sort of got in a groove, it was really a lot of fun. And having them grow up has been especially rewarding. I think you know, sometimes, you and I wonder why we do what we do. And when I read something like that, for males, it's like 87% of all CEOs and business owners all played either high school or college sports. You just kind of go, wow, like sports produced something pretty amazing. Like there's a definite correlation. And for females, it's like 91%.
Hmm.
And so it's like, oh, wait a minute, what is sports teaching kids that they can't seem to find anywhere else in society? And it's not a knock against schools or churches or any of those kinds of any of those kinds of things. However, there's something that sports produces in our young people that they carry on through the rest of their life. And so it is somewhat rewarding to see our kids grow up and see them using those same skills that they used to be successful at sports, beyond sports, into their business and even in their relationships.
What do you think are some of those skills? Obvious question here. But I think as parents that are going through this right now, sometimes lose track of that. So that's an awesome stat and an awesome kind of way to look at it. But it gets hard to look at it that when you're playing in a tournament every weekend and you're driving your kid everywhere and they're comparing themselves to teammates and others and who's on Instagram and everything else. So I guess two questions. What are the skills that you're talking about? And how can parents better keep track of those skills, focus on those skills?
Yeah. Yeah. There's one or two that I think stand out above the rest. And that is number one would be your ability to reframe failure. Because as you get older, you just experience failure more often, and it affects your life. Like the stakes are a little bit higher when you experience failure. It might be a failure in business or a failure at your job in some way, shape, or form. It could be you're fixing your house and you've done something wrong and you've messed up and it's cost you three times as much. Like your ability to let go of some of those struggles or challenges or the feeling of failing, is pretty powerful. And so the ability to reframe things in your own mind is probably pretty powerful. And that's what we're constantly doing with our kids. Baseball's an obvious sport where, if you're hitting 300, you're an all-star. But I think in a lot of other sports as well, when, your team loses, and even if you've caused the loss, like proverbially caused the loss, we don't mean that literally, but let's just say you feel like, the ball was in your hands and you didn't make the shot or something happened, like your ability to like get back up on your horse and saying, yeah, give me the ball again. I'm not going to be afraid to take that shot or have all the pressure on me in the batter's box. Like that's a pretty healthy perspective to have, is your ability to bounce back from a failure and reframe it. So, what are your thoughts about that as you see that you're dealing with young people all the time, and how they deal with failure?
Yeah, that's a great one, and one again that I think we lose track of as parents, and um, maybe in the moments, like big picture, we understand how important that is, but moment to moment, we lose track of that, just like our young athletes can,
Yeah.
and it gets too easy to um, really accentuate the outcome. Yeah, that sucked. That didn't go our way, and we lose track of the big picture of, well, yeah, that didn't go our way, but there's a bigger purpose here, and that's being able to get back on our feet and come out punching again the next time around. So 100%, that's a huge one for both athletes and for parents to recognize and try to lean into. I think the hard part is, how do parents, and this is what we do as mental performance coaches, right? And we're not asking parents to be mental performance coaches unless that's something you want to do. And it's really hard, right? Even for pro athletes, I'm sure that's something you're dealing with all the time. Like, we fail, how do we get back up? That's not a one size fits all answer or an easy answer, I don't think. Um, but how do you think the bigger picture, and for this podcast, how can parents keep that big picture in mind and help their son or daughter to be able to more regularly overcome adversity, more regularly be able to reframe failure, adversity? Thoughts on that? Like what parents can do, step in today,
Yeah.
this weekend? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's actually a lot more simple than I think people make it out to be. And that is, ask your kid questions. There's some fundamental questions that you can ask your kid, because everybody dwells longer than they should on the failure in that moment. Like the moment has passed and whatever has happened has happened. And and to use that moment as a source of teaching is to evaluate. But when is the worst time to evaluate your performance? Well, it's right after a loss, right? That's the worst time, or when you're feeling terrible about something. It really is not the very best time to evaluate and get some feedback. And so to sort of ride that emotion for a bit, it's interesting too. My wife and I were chatting just recently about something that I'm learning more and more about is the word emotion. That we all have emotions, and feelings are the meaning that we attach to emotions. And so asking our kid what they're feeling in the moment is can be pretty powerful, or what they're feeling after a game is so just be curious. That's probably the best way I could probably frame it. Is just be curious about your son or your daughter and what they're going through in that moment, and allow those feelings to come up. It's kind of like a well. As your soul and your emotions are kind of like in this well in a pot. And as a parent, you want to help your kids sort of bring up the pot to the surface where light can be shown on it, because you want to know what's in the pot. You want to know what they're feeling and give them an opportunity to be able to share those things. But it's hard to do when it stays down inside of the well. And so asking questions is like pulling up that pot and allowing the sunshine to hit that so you can actually take a look at it and see what's there. And then you can address some of those things and some of the fears and some of the insecurities that they may have. So I think asking questions and being curious is probably one of the very best tools that we have as parents.
That's great. I think it's hard to ask questions and be curious without, as parents, already having formulated an opinion
Mm.
on what it should or shouldn't look like and how we should or shouldn't be able to move forward. So that's something I think. Would you agree with that? I mean, I'm just reflecting on my own experience and then talking to parents. It's normal to, as people our age, to be able to look at a 15-year-old and know that they don't have it figured out,
Mhm.
and know maybe this is, or think we know that this is the right or wrong answer, whatever. But it's so powerful, and let them taking ownership of that, and navigating it themselves, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Very
thoughts.
much so. Very much so. Like if you think about you and I and or any other adult and all the parents that are listening out there, um, without vulnerability, there is no healing for us, which is a scary thing, because if we're going through something that's really difficult and we share our vulnerable feelings with someone, but somehow we're able to move past difficulties and heartaches and trauma and challenges more when we're able to voice them and kind of find the language and create space for them, and a trustworthy or safe space for them. Because when it's not safe, we just won't do it again. And so the respect of the individual and the respect of like respecting what they're going through is incredibly important, because they won't open up again. And so
Love
as
it.
a parent, it's like, well, wait a minute, like we want our children to move past things, especially the failures that they experience in their life. And so in order to do that, we have to create a safe space as their parent for them. And so asking questions in almost like in a non-judgmental, like we're not really waiting to tell them the answer, but just keep creating spaces and keep asking questions that allow them to explore their own feelings about something. It actually moves them past the failure or the trauma or the that emotional event far quicker if they process it. And it's really interesting that you and I are the same way. Is when we have the space to be able to talk about those things, and just sort of connect with another person, and we have that invitation, how wonderful those moments can be. That's why people go to therapists, because it's a safe place to be able to explore your feelings. But we can do that with our kids, and part of our job is to create emotionally healthy kids. And I see today that a lot of parents don't create that safe space. What's taking the place of us asking questions is a screen time or distraction. Instead of dealing with their feelings, we're just sort of distracting them from their feelings. I'm not sure that's the best option.
That's really good. Super powerful. Love it. If So I love that. Creating a safe space, asking lots of great questions. Is there next steps parents can take to help the reframing? So maybe the son or daughter works through things themselves, sees the next step forward, sees where they want to go next, but maybe not. And I think this is, a certain level of self-awareness with the kid, probably a certain age. Um, but sometimes they can just sit with their emotions and sit with their feelings, and they just regurgitate thoughts about their thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Um, if a parent is seeing that and we're not, they're not quite able to take the next step, any thoughts on that? I'm just thinking about us as dads, but also mental performance coaches. There, in my mind, there is a next step. And again, some kids take it on their own, depending on the self-awareness, depending on the age, depending on if they've been here before and had time to reflect and all these things. But yeah, your thoughts on then what, if there is a then what, that parents might be able to help with.
Well, I'm dying to know what you would say because you said that you have an idea. So why don't you go first? That would be really fun.
Okay, well, yeah, the parents have probably heard me talk about this kind of formula, but I love, and I don't start it with what it should be started with, which is just what you said with parents, this safe space, this openness where kids can, I'm just thinking about that car ride home, right? Where they usually get in, and another mental performance coach and I that do ongoing podcasts together just did a short 10-minute podcast on this. The power of asking what went well, that question, what went well, opens up this space, as you described it so beautifully, to be able to explore, and it's not coming from a place of I know best. Anyway, so creating that safe space, I love that as number one. If they are having a hard time navigating, number two would be um, best ways to move forward from this. Like, what is the next best step? And it could just be one step. It doesn't have to be 10 steps. Um, but again, like we're talking baseball, or that missed shot, at the end of the game, and they feel like the weight of the world, and they cost their team the win, and all, whatever it might be. Let's talk about it. What are you feeling about this situation? Love that. Safe space, open, hear them, hear what they're thinking and feeling. And then, though, if they're just keep sitting with it, okay, Johnny, Susie, like, where do we go from here? What are your thoughts on where we go from here? What's the next best place to move forward? That would be my thought on, again, there's a lot of stuff we could get into this really deep, which is cool what we do, but ruminating on these thoughts, we don't want that either, right? We don't want them to the next day still be sitting with these thoughts and feelings if they're negative. There has to be a point where, okay, what comes next? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, there's a kind of a answer on the surface, and then there's a deep answer. But the answer on the surface, just to address it that way, is to what action step are you inviting them to take? So there's got to be some outlet or expression that goes from their thought life to their behavior or an action step that they want to take. So I would suggest ending the conversation with like, what do you want to do about this? Like, what's something that you can do? So for example, like after a loss, as you well mentioned, you can ask what's right. And then there's probably a couple more questions that you're asking. What's right, what's wrong, and what's next is sort of a really simple formula. And the what's next is typically action oriented. So that's sort of the surface way of answering that question. There is a little bit of a deeper way, and it really comes to or speaks to the definition of mindset. And so where do you get a mindset from, and how do you improve it in your child? And so here's how I would describe it. This is something I've been working on for about 7 years, and I finally was able to sort of like put it into a physics equation, and I find it to be really, really helpful. So you have an experience, and so the experience of your child. So the child is experiencing something, or it could be something that you and I have experienced. If you want to, talk about you and I, but typically it's keep it in the realm of the child. So they have an experience, and in brackets, it's something that they have thoughts and feelings about. So they have the thoughts and feelings about the experience that they had. So let's say they struck out in a crucial moment in baseball, and the kid's hurting quite a bit. So that was an experience that they have thoughts and feelings about. And then outside of those parentheses, you have their response. So how did they respond to the thoughts and feelings about the experience that they had? So it's not just the experience, you're also responding when you become more mature in your thinking to the thoughts and the feelings that you have. So now they have a response. And so their response could have been that they were very emotional, let's say, and very upset. And it was a traumatic experience for them. So so after they have a response, now they've created a belief about themselves. And that is what to keep your eye on when it comes to your child is what is the belief that they are forming about themselves because of the experience, the thoughts and feelings and their response. So if they can improve their response, the belief about themselves can be positive and can be uplifting. Like they'll say, you know what, that didn't go so well, but I believe in myself. And so, but if that experience didn't go well, and they had some pretty negative thoughts and feelings about themselves, and they didn't respond well, and now you're having to repair the belief about themselves because that's really what's going on. That's really deep beneath the surface is the belief that they have about themselves, and you put all of that together. All of that is a mindset, and so what Andy McKay from the Seattle Mariners taught me was, Gary, it's a fantastic equation, but it's missing something. And I was like, oh man, tell me, please. I'm dying to know. He says that the mindset must result in new and improved behaviors. In other words, there's got to be that action step. You do something different. There's a pattern interrupt. And what's fun about my equation is once you create a new and improved behavior, it's kind of like and circles back to the very beginning, which is a new experience. So now you've created a really healthy action step for yourself that creates a new experience that you can have new and improved thoughts and feelings about, that you can have new and improved responses to, the new and improved belief about yourself, with a new and improved mindset. So this is how you build a mindset, but it's that belief piece. I think
Mm.
that really our kids, especially since they're so vulnerable at that age, when they're a little bit older, the belief piece isn't as pronounced because they already believe in themselves, or they probably wouldn't be where they are. You got to have a certain amount of belief in yourself to play at a college level. But I think if you're in that 15 and under category or 17 and under category, that self belief piece. And so as a parent, you're really addressing them. You're almost teaching them how to respond to their thoughts and feelings. The experiences are always going to come, but if you can help them improve their response to things, and then help them improve their self belief, that's about as great as a gift as you can give your kids that live on for years to come.
Beautiful. Really good. Let's if you don't mind, you crushed that. Let's talk about one more area that again you believe we're circling it all the way back. Super important to grow through sports, things to learn through sports. You talked about how now the kids are 25 getting into business and how so many athletes are now at these higher levels in business. So however you want to dive into it, another thing that you think comes out of sports, another life lesson, if you will, that give me one more big one.
Yeah, well, there's, as you mentioned, and you're insinuating there's so many of them, right? But it's like if you could pick a couple, two or three of the biggies, I would say another one would be your self-talk, because you do it all day long. Like nobody talks to you more than you. And so helping our young people um, practice good self-talk is crucial. And there are different kinds of self talk. Like in athletics, I can think of at least three, if not more. But the big three are instructional self talk. So, give yourself instructions on what to do. The second one is motivational self talk. And the third one is focus talk. So you're going to tell yourself to kind of dial in and focus and concentrate, and the inspirational stuff is, come on, let's get going. I got this. Just sort of talking yourself into being in the right frame of mind for something. And those things really do seem to supersede sports. Like we can use that at all different phases, all the different domains of our life, for many, many years to come. And even today, waking, we were just talking before we went on air about, not getting enough sleep. It's like, yeah, what am I telling myself in those moments? And listening to yourself isn't always the most healthy thing to do because your thoughts, we're not always sure where our thoughts come from. I love that old adage that you can't keep a bird from landing on your head, but you can keep it from building a nest there. And so, yeah, those thoughts will come in from all different types of directions, but what you choose to focus on in terms of your self-talk is really important. So I think that self-talk piece, I think is a biggie.
So does that, just to try to be real clear on here, that last little piece you talked about, I think brought clarity to it. Self talk, you're kind of relating it to not necessarily like I'm trying to be super motivational to myself. Not that that's a bad thing, but
Mhm.
I always think about self talk as this weird thing where are we lying to ourselves?
Mhm.
But in the frame that you're talking about it, it sounds more like what what are you thinking about your thoughts? Is that right? Like what's the
Yes.
self talk? What's going on in your head? The bird lands on my head. Am I going to let it sit here, or am I going to do something about it? Is that more? And again, I'm thinking about this with parents, and we hear all these things. We see all these little click things. Athletes pumping themselves up on the sideline or doing these things, which again, they're great if they have meaning. Um, they don't serve any purpose just from being verbalized, vocalized. I'm kind of bouncing around here, but I guess what would you want parents to know about the self talk piece? Like, what's the connecting thing that you would say parents should know, and how they can help their son or daughter to have improved, better self
Mhm.
talk? You can
Yeah,
tie it
well,
all
it's
together.
it kind of starts with one thought for parents. And this is a good question to ask ourselves. Like we got to practice and stress test everything that we teach our kids, right? So we can work on ourselves. And one of the thoughts that is very important and meaningful and useful to me is this thought producing something desirable? What is this thought producing in me? Because it might be a familiar thought. It could be a thought that you've had for many years, but what is it producing in you? So think of the word and focus on the word produce. What is this thought producing in me? And if it's no longer, maybe it did at one point, was maybe it was useful to you, but is this thought producing something desirable? And is it helping me, or is it profitable for me in some way, shape, or form? So that's sort of the initial thought that I have. But I think the second concept is to make sure that your self talk is very controlled. So as you mentioned, like you can say all sorts of things to yourself, and you can talk yourself into things that maybe you don't want to do, or maybe you're not very good at, but you're kind of trying to hype yourself up. Well, some of that is motivational talk, and you can use that. But is that self talk before a game producing something good in you? Yeah, it might very well be, but it might not be either. And so the judge is, what is it producing in me? And so if you, like, for example, if I'm working with an athlete and they're saying, well, what do I think, during a match or before a match? I'm just like, there's only three things that you can think. You're not allowed to think other things because too many thoughts are like having too many calories, right? Too many thoughts, too many calories slows you down. You get slow and lethargic and overweight. But in the same way, it's the same thing with thoughts. So to control the amount and the quality of the thoughts that you're having requires discipline to only think about certain things. You can't really empty your brain of thoughts and expect to play at a really high level. That might be great for some type of meditation, but it's not very helpful when you're trying to like play a sport and you have to be thinking to a certain degree. So just to control the amount and the quality of thoughts, and the three, guardrails might be, or three parts of the fence actually just might be, is it motivational? Is it focused, directed, and is it instructional? During a game, you don't need to be thinking all other thoughts. So we want them to be task conscious, not self conscious in their thoughts. Because once it turns to self conscious, now your focus is on you. and how other people are experiencing you, what they're thinking about you, what your parents are thinking about you, what your coach or your teammates are thinking about you. We really want to help you stay on task, which is being task conscious as opposed to self conscious.
Really good. You circled all that back really nicely. How can parents help their son or daughter stay on this? Like understanding those three kind of types of self-talk, just asking them again, what are the conversations you're having with yourself? What is it? Sometimes they verbalize it, right? It's not even self. It's they're actually they're having self-talk, but it's vocalized. So we can hear it. We can for sure see it a lot of times. Is a good structure strategy for parents just to ask about those three areas. Is this something I wrote them down? Instructional, motivational, or focused? Or would you see, when you is this something you did with your kids? Like, we want this self talk to be really good. I think understanding it, and kids and athletes understanding, like, I think it's pretty easy to understand the importance of this. Like, self talk can take me one way and really take me down a bad path, or self talk can take me another way and give me the best chance of success that I can have. That's pretty obvious. But then when we do get in those spots, those sticky situations where we're trying to help our son or daughter navigate that, is it just asking them hitting those three areas? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you're skilled at mental performance because you dig at the right places at the right moment. So I appreciate that a lot.
Well, thank
With a
you.
lot of my athletes, when it comes to before a game, I will have them come up with their three words. So when their mind starts to wander and they kind of don't know what to think, or maybe they're thinking too much about it. All right, like they're obsessed with something, and there's a big moment coming up or a big game coming up, and they're really thinking more than they should. The protocol is to help them find three words that bring them calm, that even can be instructional or can be motivational. But the important thing is they get to choose what those three words are that dial them in. So, like for a runner, one of my clients who's cross country, a nationally ranked cross country runner, for him it's I'm a bullet, pump my elbows and light feet. So he gets to pick his three. I don't care what they are, but
Mhm.
for him they're important because he knows what he needs. And so let them choose those three words. So it just gives them uh, something familiar to go back to when their mind is wandering, and for them to refocus on those words. And those are, you might say to yourself, well, shouldn't they be thinking about other things? And I'm like, not necessarily. Like they're gonna get ready and prep for a match and whatever it is, but essentially I want their minds to be on those three words. And in that way, if they keep repeating it, they will actually practice the mental imagery and the visualization necessary in order to do some pre-practice and succeed at that. So they're already familiar with the environment and their performance and maybe a winning action or behavior that they can take. So I would think that's pretty important to have those three words. And then during the match, there's a protocol that I created a couple years ago that it seems to really work, and just based on the evidence, and that is an acronym called CAPE, CAPE. So in the moment, think of a baseball pitcher. We want them to cape like a Superman cape. C stands for control yourself. So take that universal sign to relax, right? So physiologically relaxed. You play better when you're relaxed. So the C is control yourself. A is assess the situation. Now, your brain is a supercomputer. It is remarkable what your brain is capable of assessing in a split second. So he or she is assessing all the information, the pitch count, the count from the signal from the manager, who's on base, the situation, whatever it is that you assess the situation. And that could be 1 second. It could be 3 seconds. You might look to the left or look to the right or whatever it is, or focus on something, but it's assess the situation. And then P is plan, make a plan. So now that you've calmed yourself and you've assessed the situation, you make a plan. And then E has three parts. So E stands for execute. And it has three parts. Number one is trust your plan that you just made. Because if you don't trust that, you're in trouble. So trust your plan. You can always adapt, but trust your plan, trust your training, and trust your instincts. And the best players play instinctually. They use their instincts. So in the moment, in the heat of a moment, CAPE is a wonderful, controlled thought process where their minds are not wandering, but they're just focused. And you might say, well, Gary, what about the outfielder? You can do the same thing. It's CAPE. What if you're a police officer as a parent? And you've pulled somebody over. What are you doing as a law enforcement? CAPE. Control, assess, make your plan, and trust your training, trust your plan, trust your instincts.
Love it. How something just spiraling through my brain, and parents, I'm sorry about this, but this is kind of off the parent topic. So you can check out now or stay tuned on this. For me, Gary, and what I talk to a lot of my athletes about is being in this flow state, being in the zone. And it sounds like CAPE is trying to get to that place where you're just that final piece, that trusting, letting go. Would you say that's accurate? Like just being no thought, clear mind, whatever you want, present moment. Is CAPE a way to access that? Have you found that that's what works just to kind of free everything up? I think it's really hard for athletes and for parents. So parents, welcome back. We think our son or daughter has to be filled with, and they're getting so much information. This is the biggest thing I found with clients that I work with. There's so much information. And so they're going up to the plate thinking about, I need to do this, and this. They're going to the free throw line and understanding I got to extend my elbow, flip my wrist, get on my, like all this stuff. Is CAPE a way to get, is CAPE a way to an access point or bridge into this flow state, this zone?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a great analogy or bridge to get there, and it is because on the flow chart, so to speak, you have a vertical axis, which is your performance, and the horizontal axis is the degree of difficulty, and in the middle stripe, there's that's the flow area, right? Where the flow state, where you're performing at the highest possible capacity that for you can get, and then it's an activity that you feel really great about, that you enjoy, but there's enough challenge there for you to have to concentrate to do it. It's like oftentimes after I speak publicly, I'll go golfing, or we used to golf more, but I used to go golfing. Why? Because I could focus on something else, and it required a certain degree of focus and attention. And so it just got my mind off of something else, but you can almost enter a type of flow state. So that playing instinctually kind of gets you there. In other words, your training and your plan sort of put you in the position, but now we need you to play instinctually. And if you have enough repetition and you kind of already know what to do if the ball's coming to you, then you can play pretty instinctually and be in that flow state. So the answer is yes. That's exactly where we want them to play.
Love it. Again, I'm even talking to 11, 12-year-olds about, when do you feel like you're playing at your best? You're the most free, and it always comes back to, well, I'm not thinking about anything. But we as parents and youth coaches, man, it's like, make sure you're doing this, do that, do this, do that. And it has become so hard to just, I mean, when we were kids, I was just talking to my dad about this the other day. He was asking me about the podcast and the work that I'm doing. And we've had these conversations before, but I'm just trying to get kids to play like I played, where we just drove down to the park and we played with our friends. And it was fun. And I understand it's much different. The world is in a much different place right now. But I feel like as a mental performance coach, that's like the main thing that I'm trying to do is just allow them to play free And so I love this, the Cape analogy. Um, how can parents, last thing, and then I'll let you go. How can parents help with this? Is it just writing these things down and talking to my son or daughter about these a little bit? Here's where we want to get. Here's a bridge into the zone. Playing instinctual. Sometimes the flow or zone can get a little bit woo woo for people, but I think people I want you to just play free and easy. Play with your instincts. How can parents best utilize this Cape analogy?
Well, they may not like the answer, but the very
Uh-oh.
best thing that you can do for your kid is practice it yourself. Because when it comes second nature to you, and all of a sudden you start to experience the benefits of that, it's pretty easy to pass on to your kids. And the truth of the matter is, I'm 56 and my son is 30 years, my oldest son is 30 years old. And my wife and I were on a walk the other day and we were like, I'm trying to be an example to my son when in reality it's too late. And I don't mean that like I can't have any more influence in their life. But listen, I'm 56 and that I can't give them an example of what it's like to be 51 or 48 or 35. I can only be an example to them of what it's like to be 56 today. Tomorrow it'll be 56 and so many days, right? And I can just be an example. So when he turns 56, he can look back and say, "Oh, I remember how to be 56." And I think for parents, it's like, you know what? You practice, Kate. You practice resetting. You practice neutral thinking. You practice emotional regulation. You practice those things. And then we'll be able to pass those on to our kids because our kids are really smart. They're watching us all the time. So, and it's okay, I think, to be able to bring that up in our own lives. And just when you're sitting around the table saying, I had an opportunity to cape today. I had an opportunity and let me tell you about it. And so when your kids feel like your partner's in it with them and you're learning, oh, there's a camaraderie that comes with that. Or maybe there's a situation where you needed to practice self talk or you failed at it. You failed at your self talk or you failed at CAPE and tell them about the failure and how you experienced it. Like, and what do you still believe about yourself? And just like be that example for them. I think that's the best thing that we can do for our kids.
That's beautiful. I agree. I agree 100%. Um, that's beautiful. Great way to end things. Anything else coming into this, Gary, or any last tips, tricks? We haven't gone through any really tricks. This is legit deep stuff. But anything else that you wanted to share coming into this?
Yeah, just that, we are increasingly living in the day of data and analysis, where everything is being measured. I had the opportunity to be at the University of Oregon this past year, and the analytics are off the charts. Where you can put on all these sensors all over your body, and not only are they measuring, let's say, squats and bench presses, but now they're measuring, are you bouncing it off of your chest? And are
Cool.
you, bouncing the dumbbell or the barbell off your chest? Are you going down to a full squat? And so one player did 35 squats, another player did 26 squats, but the guy who did 26 squats actually went down further. So the number is actually misleading. So it's like we just live in this day and age of analytics and data. And my caution is like, just go play the game, right? Go play the game. People will measure all sorts of things and whatever, but you just go play the game and play instinctual because ultimately that's where the game is fun. And when you're having fun, you'll be at your best.
Beautiful. Love it. Gary, thank you so much. Really appreciate the conversation, the thoughts. I think parents are gonna take a few really good nuggets out of this and hopefully help them as they're coming through this sports experience with their son or daughter. And let's for sure stay in touch. It's been great and love how you process things and the things that you're talking about. So let's for sure stay connected going forward.
I would love that and much respect. You're pretty impressive with what you do. So thank you for all that you do for everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary.